Uh, Hello everyone, this is Sigi, and welcome to NannuoLive and my tea box. Now, some of you might already be wondering, who is this guy, where's Gabriele? And I'm gonna tell you what's up in a moment, but please, first, go grab your favorite tea if you haven't done so already, and join me as I drink this wonderful 2017 Gushu Pu'er from JingMai. I'm also going to tell you a bit about what brings me here for starters. So, I basically started off as a customer of Nannuoshan around, I'd say, mid of last year. That was when I attended the tea weekend Nannuoshan organized in the Alps. And there I met Gabriele, Matthias, and a lot of other people that are really invested in tea. Maybe some of you, dear viewers, have also participated in that event. It was a lot of fun. We basically spent the entire weekend drinking tea, learning all sorts of things about tea, and having a great time together. But yeah, I met Gabriele and Matthias, and we drank a lot of tea together, and we got talking, and I mentioned that I have experience with YouTube video content creation and live streaming in particular. So I offered to help out with the NannuoLive side of the Nannuoshan YouTube channel. Some of you might have already heard of me because I've been helping run things in the background for some of the previous live streams we've done on here. And yeah, that's basically been my job so far, but I've kind of been thinking, you know, maybe I want to get back into doing actual live streams again, because for a short while I also did tea streams on my personal channel, which some of you might have also seen. And it was always a lot of fun, but just kind of doing it for myself wasn't the ideal way to go about it, I feel. So when I heard about the previous live stream, when I heard about the Pu'er project that Nannuoshan is starting, I approached Gabriele with the idea of doing some live streams for the YouTube channel about Pu'er, since that's kind of what I know and I'm familiar with and like a lot. So he talked about that with the rest of the Nannuoshan team, and we came to the decision that, yeah, let's do it, let's give it a try, and that's why I'm here today. So let's go a bit, before I go into the tea I'm gonna drink today, let's take a look at what people are saying in chat. So Alexander R. Thomas is asking if I'm gonna be using my Hongni, and no, I won't. I'm gonna be using this pot, which is a type of Junie that has small specks of Dwani mixed in. In my experience, it has worked really well with all sorts of shang, from younger ones to older ones, with the exception of the like really dank and heavily stored ones. But the tea we're drinking today is from 2017, it's quite young, it's very clean, and it works well in this pot, I think. We'll see how it goes. So I've already preheated my pot, I've already put together a nice pile of leaves, as you can see here. So why don't we take a look at those leaves first? First of all, I'm going to show them to you on camera here, so we can all get a bit of a real-life impression. It's kind of difficult to do this, but I hope you can see them fine. Generally, yeah, they're Pu'er leaves. They look quite nice, well formed, not too strongly pressed, not chopped up a lot. They look fairly intact. And all in all, I think this looks promising. While we're at it, I also prepared a picture for you, for those of you that haven't seen it on the Nannuoshan website yet, which is a very nice product picture of this particular Bing. So let's take a quick look at that as well. Alright, there it is. So here you can see the Bing in its entirety. Once again, nice whole leaves, good mix of leaves, it all looks fairly intact, decently loosely pressed. All signs of like good quality and good craftsmanship. Of course, ultimately, the thing that counts is what it actually tastes like and how it behaves, but that's what we're here to find out today. I'm also going to be telling you a bit about what JingMai as a tea region is known for, where this particular tea is from, and a bit of history and the like. But before we do all of that, I need to get started on this tea, so everyone, please also get your teas ready, and let's do some smelling, do some drinking, do some tasting, see what everything's like. Now, first of all, I'd say let's smell the dry leaves. So I have my preheated pot here. I'm gonna put the leaves in there. Also, I saw that Gabriele and Elsa and many other people that I've also seen from previous streams are here. So hello to you all, thank you for joining once again. I am glad to have you, and I'm happy to see that you're also interested in what I'm putting on the channel here. Alright, so after I've put the leaves in the preheated pot, I'm gonna wait a few seconds for the aroma to really come out, and then we're gonna give this a smell. Now, I've had a bit of a cold this week, so if my sense of smell isn't perfect, please forgive me. But we'll see what we can do. Ah, looks like Forgotten Brew is also having some 2017 JingMai. Very good. Very nice. Let's enjoy it. Alright. So... okay. That's quite nice. Good aromatic intensity, first of all, which is always a nice sign. It's somewhat unfortunate if your young tea doesn't have much aroma to give, but this one definitely does. So, what am I smelling? I'd say I'm getting some floral notes, but also a bunch of fruit notes that I'd say are most closely reminiscent to something along the lines of citrus, which, from my experience, is something JingMai often tends to have in one way or another. And then I'm also getting a like red fruit type note. I can't really put my finger on what it is exactly, but something like red berries-ish. Maybe coupled with the floral thing, a sort of rosehip type note. And then there's a bit of like woodiness and richness underneath that makes me think almost of licorice in a certain way, like a woody, spicy sort of kind of thing that's faint in the back, but rounds out the tea really nicely. Okay, I need to reboil my water real quick, so I'll be on mute for a second while that happens, because my kettle is really loud and really slow, and I don't think you want to hear that. But I'm gonna rinse these leaves, and then we'll be back with the smell of the wet leaf. So, see you all in a second. Alright, and I'm back. So, I just poured some hot water onto these leaves and I can already smell them from here. It's a really, really nice smell. Like I mentioned, high aromatic intensity. Some audio delay, okay, that's interesting. But we'll have to make do, I think. Okay, so just short rinse. As I said, this looks quite clean, so we don't need any sort of elaborate rinsing here. Okay. So the rinse is done. Let's have a look at that real quick. Oh, it's kind of tough to make the angle work here, sorry. But if you see it down there, like it's already got a nice golden yellow type color to it, which is fairly typical for Yangsheng, but also quite nice. It also smells very good. Okay, now, like I mentioned, let's take a closer look at the wet leaf. Ooh, oh yeah. That smells good. Oh, that's really good. Mmm. Really, really nice bouquet, if you will. It still retains a lot of floral notes and fruity notes, and they come together in a really beautiful way. That rosehip note I mentioned is a lot stronger now. Ooh, oh, that's so lovely. I still get a bit of that citrus. And it's still got those, like, slightly heavier notes underneath. A bit of wood, maybe slightly mineral. But these fruit notes in particular are really doing it for me right now. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be good. So I'm going to get started on the first steep. And while we do this, for those of you who are also drinking this tea, what kind of impressions are you getting? I noticed some people say like fruits and floral with regards to JingMai as well. Are you getting anything else? Alright. I need to reorganize my working space here. There's a lot of stuff going on my desk. I'm probably gonna let this steep for, I'd say, around somewhere between 30 to 40 seconds. The ratio I usually go for in this 120 milliliter pot is 7 grams of sheng. Obviously it always varies a bit depending on what your tea demands, if you will. But in this particular case, 7 grams seems to be fine. It's usually what I try when I drink a tea for the first time, because it tends to just work out, and the steeps I do tend to be a bit longer, and I tend to do a bit some fewer steeps overall compared to people that like steep very quickly, but I find that this gives a nice, intensely flavorful type of steep. Tobacco notes is not something I'm getting either right now. It does have a certain, like, I don't want to say smokiness because I don't really feel like that's what it is, but there's a hint of like warm wood, if that makes sense. My pot is 120 milliliters. And like I mentioned, I'm using 7 grams of tea. Alright, so first steep, going in. You can look at the color again here. Oh yeah, I can definitely see honey and like creamy. It does have a sort of creamy impression. Alright. the liquor itself also smells quite good. Oftentimes with Pu'er, I find that the actual tea liquor doesn't have that much of a smell, especially when compared to like the wet leaves, but this one does give off a good amount of smell. So, I hope everyone's ready as well. I'm about to drink the first steep. Let's enjoy. Ah, I see. Alright, so the first thing here that's quite present for me is a sort of citrus peel type bitterness. It's not particularly strong, but it is there, and it is something that I've come to associate with JingMai and other surrounding areas. A lot of like citrusy type things going on. In addition to that, I'm getting some floral notes that sort of have these berry-ish aromas that I mentioned when I was smelling the leaves kind of mixed in there, which once again reminds me of rosehip in particular. There is a use for the pitcher, Gabriele, namely that it cools down the tea a bit, because I would like to not burn my tongue while I'm doing the stream, so I'm taking a bit of extra care. Also, I mean, look at this picture, can you fault me? It looks really nice. Other things I'm getting from this JingMai Sheng are a sort of grain flavor-like note that I often find in younger Sheng Pu'er. It's kind of hard to describe, but grain is probably the closest thing I can think of. There's also a slight amount of like vegetal savoriness, which is also very typical for young Sheng. And this rosehip note is especially strong in the finish. I think that's really where it comes through and it starts lingering on the tongue. All in all, this seems to present a really nice, cohesive set of flavors. A lot of things you'd expect from a typical young Sheng, with the like slight savoriness, that like grain kind of note. Some things you'd expect from a Sheng from this area, with the citrus type flavors, and then a very pleasant sort of feeling overall with the floral notes and the rosehip type thing. Texture-wise, I'd say this has like medium viscosity maybe. It's slightly astringent, slightly mouth drying. All in all, a very round package though. Ah, okay. Now that we've gotten through the first steep, and we've done the analytics, so to speak, I'm gonna pour in the next steep, and while I do that, we can start talking a bit about JingMai as a tea area. Because it's a very interesting case, actually. JingMai is an area that's southwest of Pu'er City in Samao, just north of the border to Xishuangbanna. It used to have a lot of ancient tea gardens up until the 1980s or so, but at that time things changed. That's gonna be something we'll go into a bit later, after we drink a bit more tea and talk about some other things. But first of all, JingMai is known for being part of the 6 famous tea mountains. Now, those of you who are already a bit more familiar with the subject might say, but wait, aren't there 2 sets of 6 famous tea mountains? And you are absolutely right. To recap, the first set of 6 famous tea mountains is east of the Lansang or Mekong River. It's Iwu, Ibang, Mangze, Gedeng, Manjuan, and Yole. There is another set of 6 famous tea mountains that's west of the Lansang River, and that is Nannuo, Manqiao, Bulang, Mangsong, Bada, and today's topic, JingMai. Alright, I think my steep will be good to go soon, just gonna wait a bit longer. What are we, where are we at in terms of steeps, everyone, in the chat? Are you all going at about the same pace as me? Are you going faster, slower? It's always interesting to learn more about people's steeping habits. Also, I know I said I was going to pour into the pitcher, but I seem to be a bit besides myself today, so I just forgot. But it'll be fine. We'll just let it cool down a bit. Once again, a lovely smell. This one sort of looks a bit more viscous in the cup, a bit darker as well. Ooh, aged white tea. That's also nice. Smells great. Oh, Gabriele is putting the 2 sets of 6 famous tea mountains in chat. Thank you a lot for that. That generally is a lot of help. Shui Jingui. That's also fine. And a Mangsong 2015 Shang. Also nice. It seems like everyone's roughly at the second steep though. Yan doing the first one right now. Also good, also good. I guess we'll be here for a while today. Still feels really hot, but let's give it a try. More bitterness now, which makes sense. Slightly more astringency, but also a more viscous texture. I'd say we're getting into like high viscosity territory here. The notes are leaning more towards separate sets of floral notes and then this citrus type thing right now. The rosehip impression I got on the first steep doesn't seem as present anymore. Oh, hey Kupuntu, thank you for joining us. For those who don't know, Kupuntu is the admin of the Tea Discord server and a good friend of mine. Yeah, this is really good. It also feels like a very nice afternoon type tea. I'm not exactly sure why, but the current atmosphere I've got going on here seems to suit this tea quite well. Now, this tea in particular is from a specific place in JingMai which is called Dapingjiang. Dapingjiang is a fairly small village that has some rather interesting geographical features. It is entirely located on a plateau at about 1,600, not 160 meters elevation. That's about half the size of a football field. Being as small of a village as it is, it's only inhabited by 3 families nowadays. The temperatures on that plateau are also fairly cold, which is why the people there actually really like drinking roasted tea, funnily enough. The like plantation situation, if you want to call it that, in Dapingjiang is quite diverse. They have one very large sort of king tree in the village, which has a trunk diameter of around 160 centimeters. Around that king tree, there are several ancient tea trees that are regularly harvested for some very nice material. My presumption would be that the tea we are drinking today was from some of these trees. The outer parts of the village have some younger Shangtai style plantations. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term Shangtai, it basically means that a tea plantation is created with like young trees and whatnot, and then I don't want to say abandoned, because it's rather that it's like left to grow naturally. So unlike some of the more well-known tidy plantations that are quite heavily regulated and whatnot, Shangtai style tea is usually just kind of left to its own devices and then harvested, so it should give it a bit more of a wild or natural feel, if you will. Welcome King Kong 11235. Yes, I'm doing some tea streams. It's fun. Thank you for joining. Now, it's actually kind of funny, this whole roasted tea thing they do in Dapingjiang village, because that's actually what they use the king tree leaves for entirely. Like, all of the roasted tea they drink there is made from the leaves from that giant ancient tree. Alright. Second steep done. Let's get started on steep number 3. I'm gonna reboil my water again real quick, so I'm gonna mute myself, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, and we're back. I just decanted the third steep. We're gonna let this sit for a moment and hopefully remember to use the pitcher this time. Strawberry jam, wow, that sounds lovely. You know, Jan, I've surprisingly never had like well-aged JingMai tea. Oh, Gabriele asked an interesting question. What about the bitterness of the tea? Is it as bitter as the other areas in western Xishuangbanna that are like just south of JingMai? Or is it milder? Now, from my impression, I'd say West Xishuangbanna is generally the area that I would associate with this citrus peel type bitterness that I mentioned earlier, that's also present in this tea. And in this one, I would say that it's a fair bit milder than it is in something like a Bulang tea. Bulang in particular, I feel, is a tea where that citrus peel or even sometimes citrus pith bitterness is often very strong and upfront, whereas in JingMai it tends to be more in the back, and it also tends to have sweet notes that are citrus-like, and not just citrus peel bitterness. Now, I've had a few other JingMai teas, and this one I'd say has a touch more bitterness than the other ones I've had, but it doesn't have a lot of bitterness. I think it's still a very pleasant and comfortable tea. What are everyone else's impressions of the bitterness in this tea? Alright. I'm also going to try to show you all the wet leaves in my pot. I'm not sure if they're going to be visible on camera, but we can try. Yeah, as you can see, they're still quite green. Makes sense, it's a tea from 2017, so like just barely 3 years old. Not a lot of aging going on there, but I'd imagine it's already lost some of the like harsh flavors Shang tends to have when it's really young. And I'm sure it's gonna develop quite nicely in the coming years, given proper storage and everything, of course. Oh, you can? That's great. Nice. That means I'll be able to keep doing it in future streams. Yeah, I think orange perfume would make sense in a way, because I think like the components of the orange that go into perfume are usually from the peel itself, like those ethereal oils. Essential oils, I'm not exactly sure what the proper English term is here. Yeah, that's a good point, Forgotten Brew. Some methods of steeping can make it so you can avoid a lot of the bitterness that would otherwise be present. My personal preference is to have some bitterness in there, because I think it paints a fairly nice contrast to other things that are going on in the tea. But generally, when you are trying to explore a particular tea in depth, it always makes sense to try different styles of brewing, different parameters, etc., to see sort of what the range of that tea is. Because with my usual style, I'm gonna get an experience that makes it comparable to other teas that I brew in my usual style. But if there's one particular tea I want to learn about more, then I think it would make sense to, for instance, like try it with very short steeps in the Gaiwan for once, maybe even try a young tea with not fully boiling water to see what it does there, and to then try something that's closer to my method, where you do longer steeps that are more holistic in a sense, but that might lose some of the very fine nuances that can be present. Yeah, this is still very nice. Like, the bitterness stayed at about the same level from the second steep. The astringency has gone down a bit, I'd say. So that's great. And the aromas are starting to move from that floral direction more towards fruitiness again. So slightly less bright sweet notes, because at least in my mind, like, floral notes are the brightest type of sweet note out there, with maybe citrus being the second, and then other types of fruit become darker and darker and darker until you get into the territory of like stewed fruit type notes, or the type of sweet notes that you'd usually find in a very aged chunk, maybe like a sweet tobacco type note, or if you're moving towards roasted teas, the like sweet chocolate type notes, caramel and that kind of stuff. That would be on the opposite end of floral in my mind. Oh, Alexander says he's getting some returning sweetness. That's nice. Oh, he's starting to get used to it. That's even nicer. I mean, being able to detect Huigan and being able to make use of it is a very good skill to have. Yeah, this is a very pleasant steep. I think this one's my favorite so far. It presents probably the most balanced impression of all of the flavors I've gotten so far, coupled with a very pleasant texture that makes it easy to drink. Very, very nice. Dirk, hey, welcome. Welcome to the stream. You are still missing a pale or yellow Dwani teapot. Will that be offered on our website? I will have to defer that question to Gabriele because he's the owner. I'm just helping out with streaming stuff, so unfortunately I am unaware of any upcoming products and the like. Jan says he's getting creamy raspberry ice cream in his 2008 JingMai. That sounds really, really good, and I would love to try that at some point. Okay, Gabriele mentions that new Dwani pots are on the way to Berlin. It will take a while until they're available online because if you've watched the Nannuoshan YouTube videos that sort of talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, then you might be aware that getting a product onto a website takes a fair amount of work that goes beyond just acquiring the product. You also have to like take product pictures, write product descriptions, translate them into whatever languages your website is available on, figure out how much you can sell it for, etc., etc. It's a surprising amount of work, I'd imagine. Forgotten Brew says he wants to bathe in the scent of his empty cup. And that gives me a good idea. We haven't smelled the empty cup yet, so let's do that. Ooh, oh yeah. Yeah, I completely understand why you would want to do that, because that smells really, really good. One thing I've noticed when it comes to empty cup smells is that they often tend to be a fair bit sweeter than what you get from the wet leaves or even the pot lid. And I think that's also the case here. I'm really getting a fairly prominent honey type smell. Really nice, really, really nice. But that also means I finished my steep, so it's time for another one. Steep 4 coming in. I think while this one's steeping, we can take a bit of time to talk more about JingMai. Also, hello, Mrs. Smarter. Welcome to my first ever tea stream on NannuoLive. Yeah, we've already mentioned that JingMai is part of one of the groups of 6 famous tea mountains. We've already mentioned that it used to have a lot of ancient tea gardens, but something changed. So, let's talk about what changed, because there's actually a fair bit of interesting history there. Now, during the 1980s, the, if you will, landscape of JingMai underwent a fairly drastic change. There used to be a lot of ancient tea gardens everywhere, but many of them were unfortunately cut down to make space for sugarcane farms. Luckily, that wasn't done everywhere, but only in places where irrigation was possible. However, after some time, it turned out that sugarcane is actually not as profitable as tea. And eventually, a lot of the sugarcane farms were replaced by modern tea plantations in the 1990s. These, funnily enough, the tea from these new plantations was actually seen as more prestigious than the ancient tea garden trees in JingMai for a long time. Many of these ancient gardens were considered useless for some reason. And new plantation tea sold for way more money back then. Especially in 2002 to 2007, JingMai as an area saw a massive boom. So before the first big like Pu'er price crash, JingMai really came into its own, if you will. It, according to some of the sources that Gabriele and I contacted before doing the stream, like while we were in the middle of doing a bit of research, tea from JingMai was actually almost as sought after as tea from Banjiang or Bingdao are nowadays. It's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? Because like Bingdao and Banjiang are so incredibly hyped. Everyone who gets into Pu'er instantly knows, okay, Banjiang is a big area, Bingdao is a big area, these are the big names, these fetch the big prices. But JingMai? Not really. Would any one of you ever have thought of JingMai as like a particularly prestigious or expensive and sought after area? But I mean, yeah, that's what it was like from 2002 to 2007. JingMai was the place to be, if you will. There is one more oh my god, I've completely forgotten about this steep. Let's hope it won't be. I mean, I think it'll be fine. Like this is a very pleasant tea. This isn't gonna be like your Lauman or something that just knocks you out if you steep it for too long. But there's a lot to say when it comes to JingMai, so I guess it's only natural to kind of start talking and forget about doing other things. Yeah, this is still fine. Hey, welcome. Ah. The smell is getting a bit mellower now. I guess it makes sense, like we're 4 steeps in already, and these are quite heavy steeps. Let's have a sip. Yeah, good stuff. Despite the extended steeping time, this tea is still performing quite well, and I'm enjoying it quite a lot. I hope our dear viewers are as well. Nice. So yeah, there's one more important development to talk about when it comes to JingMai, and that is a fairly recent one. The agricultural practices in JingMai changed around the year 2010, with a big move away from pesticides and herbicides and towards more natural farming methods. For instance, one method that's quite prominently employed in JingMai is the use of so-called shade trees, where you have bigger trees growing in a tea plantation that are not tea, that sort of are used to provide shade to the tea trees or the tea bushes, depending on how old they are. And this is a good way to, like, make the tea a bit more mellow and soft and comfortable. Kind of similar to what some types of Japanese tea undergo during their growth, where either, like in Kabusicha, they're shaded for a short period of time, or for a Gyokuro, where they're shaded for a longer period of time. So, I mean, it's not quite the same because they're not fully shaded, they just get a bit of shade from the trees. But it definitely has an effect on the flavor, and given what people have reported about JingMai in the chat so far, that it's quite pleasant, quite nice, quite sweet, I think we can see that effect. Nowadays, herbicides and pesticides are quite rarely used in JingMai. In part, that has to do with some laws that were introduced that require people to get permits from their local governments if they want to use pesticides and herbicides. But it also has to do with people's preferences. Overall, in the Pu'er community, I'd say there's been a move away from these sort of practices and more towards a desire for organic or natural harvesting type productions. Very nice. Okay. Time for Steep 5. I feel like I've been going quite fast with these steeps. Yeah, it really does have a lot of viscosity, Forgotten Brew, doesn't it? Quite a nice feature if you ask me. I really like it when tea has this, like, almost oily texture that really sticks to your mouth, because it also leaves you with a really long aftertaste. Okay, this is gonna sit here for a while, so if you have any questions or any comments in chat, please go ahead. Medium thickness. Jan says he's got medium thickness. After the third infusion, he got a lot of sweetness. Yeah. Lychee juice with honey. Ooh. Yeah. Your JingMai also sounds very, very nice. I do think it's a very good area overall. And one of the, like, upsides of JingMai is that it's probably a good way to introduce someone to Pu'er. My favorite Pu'er region? Oh boy, okay. So, I think overall, I really enjoy Iwu area teas, but I sort of have a bit of a hang-up about Iwu in particular, that, where, like, commonly Iwu is known for being a very easy to drink and approachable, soft and mellow, not very complicated kind of tea. But I do think that's just a stereotype to some extent. Many of the villages in Iwu can be quite different from that typical image. In particular, I think tea from the Mahe village is fairly strong for an Iwu tea, but it still has many of the notes people like. Like, a good Mahe tea is gonna have wood, it's gonna have spice, it's gonna have a strong type of tropical fruit flavor, and it's all gonna come together in this beautiful thing, and it's gonna make you sweat. And it's gonna taste delicious, and it's gonna be a really viscous tea. Yeah, I guess it's kind of clear that Mahe is very much my favorite area when it comes to younger Pu'er. What's everyone's favorite region? Like, I've talked at length about what I like, but you all being here and chat with me makes it so that we can have a bit of a discussion. Are there any other areas that you all really enjoy? Gabriele says that JingMai and Iwu have something in common that they're both often mild and thick, and yeah, I would definitely agree with that. While the concrete flavor profiles can be fairly different, the characteristics are very similar. The texture is similar. I'd say Iwu often has maybe even a bit lower astringency. They're both quite approachable. And they're both quite delicious. Kupuntu says he really likes Lauman. I agree. Young Lauman is definitely an experience worth having. I think if you can handle that tea and its bitterness, you can probably handle almost everything else out there. And while it does have an intense bitterness, it also tastes very good, and it's just very good tea overall. Alexander says he liked some Iwu Huangpian he had recently, also very nice. And Yan mentioned he really enjoys Bingdao. Is that the Bingdao from Nannuoshan in particular, or have you tried others as well? Because I definitely agree the Bingdao from Nannuoshan is very, very nice. Forgotten Brew enjoys Hekai and JingMai. Also great choices. Joseph mentions that he's still exploring regions, but he's liked stuff from around Pu'er city so far, so like Sumao area. Which means that you would probably enjoy this JingMai as well, right? Gabriele says he likes the Linzang region as a whole, no specific place, but he enjoys the spiciness and mild bitterness. Yes, I completely agree. There are a lot of good teas in Linzang with those features, and I think that spice note in particular is something Linzang does better than most other places. The only other one I can really think of is maybe some teas from Nannuo also have that kind of spiciness, but it's much less common than it is in Linzang overall. Okay, I think I'm actually gonna get started on the sixth steep already, and I need to reboil my water, so I'm gonna mute myself real quick. In the meantime, please keep talking about your favorite regions. I'll be back with you in a moment. Alright, and we're back. Jan does mention that he really enjoys the 2013 Bingdao from Nannuoshan. That's nice. Speaking of that, that is actually a good segue into something else I think we can look at real quick, because something I haven't talked about much so far is the whole Gushu thing. This tea is labeled as Gushu, and Gushu in general, old tree material, ancient tree material, is something, of course, that's really sought after in the Pu'er community nowadays. Everyone likes their old teas, and for a good reason. They usually provide better texture, more interesting flavor profiles, a certain type of minerality in particular that I've often found in material from older trees. Mm. And given that teas with the Gushu label often can demand higher prices, of course. However, like we've mentioned before, JingMai isn't really known as a very prestigious region nowadays. So I think it's worth investigating whether we can actually get decently priced ancient tree material from there. Because if we look at other teas that are on offer, and we've got a bunch of people talking about both Bingdao in general and the Bingdao the Bingdao from Nannuoshan in particular, that's not a cheap tea. It is very, very, very good, and I highly recommend you all try it at some point. But it's 61 cents a gram for the 200 gram Bing, or 53 cents a gram for the 400 gram Bing, which isn't cheap by any means. This JingMai I'm drinking right now, on the other hand, is only 32 cents per gram. Also, old tree material. And I guess given what we've established during the stream so far, I am enjoying it quite a lot. So JingMai might actually be a decent source of good, affordable old tree material for those of you that would like to experience that. And luckily, JingMai is fairly available outside of China, which is another big factor as well. A lot of things from more prestigious regions often, well, while some of them do find their way onto the Western-facing market, it's often not easy to come by, if you will. Alexander mentions he loves the energy in Gushu, the chachi. Yeah, and that's definitely a factor as well. Personally, I don't experience a ton of chachi overall, so I tend to not talk about it much. But relaying other people's experiences, they've often found younger plantation material to give them a more uncomfortable reaction in comparison, while the energy they get from older tree material tends to be more like relaxing, grounding, and calming. Is chachi something you all experience a lot? Right, time for steep number 6. After I decant this, I'm just gonna put in water again right away, because these final few steeps are gonna be quite long, and I really want to get as much as I can out of this tea. Yes, Jan, usually JingMai Pu'er is quite easy to drink compared to a lot of other Pu'er. Hence my earlier recommendation that JingMai might be well suited for someone who only just started getting into Pu'er. Gabriele says that in his mind he relates chachi to Bulang, and yeah, I can kind of see that. I think a lot of Bulang teas I definitely still get some sort of reaction from. Usually it involves sweating in some sense, because they are quite powerful. Gabriele mentions that chachi is a very important reason why she likes to drink Gushu. And I can definitely see that, especially with this type of calming, sort of mind-clearing energy, if you will. Alright, I've got my steep going. I've got the other one in the cup. I might have forgotten to use the pitcher again, I'm not 100% sure. But here we are. Almost 7 steeps in. This JingMai Sheng is still going quite strong. Now, of course, like I mentioned earlier, there are different ways to prepare your tea, so just going by steep numbers doesn't really tell you much, but given that I do stronger steeps and its texture is still holding up very well, I'd say this tea has been doing great so far. How's everyone's steeps coming along? Are you on your later steeps as well? I think in terms of aroma, this one has mellowed out a fair bit so far. Or by now, really. Like, this is steep number 6, this is steep number 7. I'm still getting a fair bit of sweetness, but it's not as potent anymore, and these sort of more subtle notes underneath are coming out a bit more, so it's more mineral now, it's a bit more woody. It's still quite viscous, not as viscous as it used to be, but still very good. And the astringency is entirely gone by now, so it's really just a pleasant, comfortable steep at this point. Yeah. I definitely feel kind of relaxed right now, and sort of clear-headed, if that makes sense. It's hard to say whether it's from the tea, or I just feel good in general right now, but it does feel good. I am in a good mood, and I enjoy streaming and being together with you all today. Of course, after we're done today, please let me know if you'd like to see more of these streams in the future. I'd love to bring a bit more Pu'er entertainment and maybe a bit of education to you all as well. We can have some relaxed streaming and tea drinking sessions together. Nice. Alright, steep number 7 has been going for a while. I'm gonna give it a few more seconds. Then I'm probably gonna do steep number 8. And we might call it after that. I mean, we've already been here for over an hour. Alexander says he's really enjoying and appreciating these streams. Thank you for being here as well. It's fun to do, and having an audience that I'm able to interact with while I'm doing this makes it a lot more fun. There's always 2 parts to doing these kind of things. It's not just what I'm putting out there, but also what I get back from the people that watch it. And I think both are equally important for making all of this work. In the meantime, Jan and Gabriele are having a conversation about the strength in Pu'er tea. Jan mentioned he only buys Gushu nowadays because he prefers the strength it provides. And Gabriele is about to recommend a non-Gushu tea that also has some strength, so if that's something you're looking for, and you're watching this after the stream, feel free to go back and chat through the chat log and find what he's about to post. And yeah, one of the upsides of not getting as much of a reaction from drinking Shang Pu'er is that you can just drink more in one day, which I'd definitely see as an upside, especially in settings like that tea weekend we had last year where we basically just spent 3 whole days drinking tea non-stop. I mean, of course it's not a competition, everyone should drink as much or as little as they want to, and everyone should drink what they want to drink. We're all here to enjoy ourselves, after all. By the way, if you haven't watched it yet, one of the videos I really enjoyed that Gabriele uploaded recently on the Nannuoshan channel is the one where he and Caroline are drinking a Dai 7542. It's probably the most famous Shang Pu'er in the world, and the profile it provides and the legacy this particular production holds is something that I think every Pu'er enthusiast should be familiar with and aware of. Even if 7542 is not your personal favorite, which is totally fine, it's a very important piece of Pu'er education. And honestly, I'm still seeking out some of the more well-known 7542 productions because they do provide a lot of educational value, and there's a lot of years that sort of have come into providence that I have yet to experience, but would like to at some point. Maybe that's something we can do for a future stream in a year or two. Gabriele says she had a psychedelic night in the Alps because she's sensitive, and yeah, I can totally imagine, like, we were drinking a lot of tea. Gabriele from Nannuoshan also mentioned that he's hoping to do more tea weekends in the future, and I really do hope that does happen and we'll be able to do it again at some point, because I think that weekend was probably the highlight of that year for me. It would be nice to do it again. Or even make it like a regular event. Maybe not regular in the sense of that we do it often, but that it takes place like once a year, every time, and people can come together. Very nice tea still. It's so mellow and pleasant now. I guess we've arrived at the stage where these sort of stereotypes about pleasant and comfortable tea come true, because now it's sweet, there's no astringency, there's a touch of bitterness maybe, but really this makes for some very pleasant and comfortable drinking while we get towards the later stages of this stream. It's nice. So, dear viewers, one more question to you all. Do you have a tea that makes you feel especially like comfortable and maybe at home every time you drink it? Something that you pick out from your collection every time you want to feel comfort, let's say. A tea that makes you feel happy and at home every time you drink it. Something you're maybe intimately familiar with. Have I already chosen the tea for my next tea box stream? Not yet, no. I probably need to do like a bit more drinking before I decide, because there's a lot of good stuff to go through. I'm kind of leaning towards maybe that 2014 Ewu, because it's quickly become one of my absolute favorites. And it's a very safe pick for something that I personally enjoy and that I can probably talk about for a while. So maybe we're gonna do that, we'll have to see. But as soon as I know, I'll definitely let you know, and we can talk about it. Alright, so we've got Gabriele Zimmerman with aged white shomei, being very comforting and soothing. Yeah, I can definitely see that. It does seem like a comfortable type of tea. Jan mentions Tielohan, but he's not sure anymore. So maybe your tastes are starting to change a bit, Jan. And Alexander mentions a Gaba oolong late in the evening. See, that's kind of interesting. I think we can spend a moment while this final steep is going to talk about what's up with GABA, because there are some misconceptions, and me being a psychology student, I've at least got a few rudimentary ideas about endocrinology. So GABA, for those of you that don't know, stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is one of the core neurotransmitters in the brain. And GABA, when you ingest it, doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, so just ingestion doesn't have much of an effect on how you feel. However, there was a study conducted in, I think, 1970 that proved that GABA does actually cross the blood-brain barrier through your olfactory nerves. So if you have a GABA tea and you smell it, there's a chance that some of it will go through those nerves via your sense of smell straight into your brain and have an actual effect there. So that's how I think the calming sensation of GABA tea can be explained. So if you like to drink GABA tea and you like to be comfortable drinking it, always make sure to smell your tea. Alright, we've got some More responses. Forgotten Brew mentions that he chooses black tea if he wants to feel hugged. Makes a lot of sense because, especially Yunnan black teas, because they have a lot of warm and comfortable notes. I can totally see that, and I'm gonna have to stock up on black tea at some point because I have been feeling like drinking more of it lately, in particular because it provides that kind of sense of comfort. And Shang sessions, as you might be able to see from the stream, can be quite involved, whereas black tea tends to go at a slightly more relaxed pace. Okay, we've had this steeping for a while. If you want another look at my teapot, here it is. I do love this shape a lot. It looks kind of funny, and it's very comfortable to use. Gabriele mentions that black tea is the most underestimated tea category among tea freaks, and I completely agree. I do think black tea does actually have a sense of depth to it that rarely goes recognized among people that are deeply invested in tea. Of course, a lot of tea nerds, myself included, inevitably end up just guzzling liters and liters of Pu'er tea as often as they can, and it kind of makes sense because Pu'er tea both has a certain pedigree, while also being a very interesting rabbit hole to just dive into. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is always organic matter that has craftsmanship, and in some cases even artistry applied to it, with a lot of cultural context behind it, and with a lot of geological factors going into it. So, if you want to, it's certainly possible to explore black tea at the same kind of depth as Pu'er tea as well. There might be a bit more of a barrier to it because the perception of black tea as a deep subject is maybe a bit lacking, and so might the source of information be. But if you really get yourself out there, I think it's entirely possible. And I'm sure that Gabriele, with his experiences of going to China and searching out tea, will have a lot to say about that. Oh, hey Jens, we are on the tail end of this stream. I'm glad that you and Chanel were able to tune in. I hope your interview went well. Alright, this is the final steep. Nice and clear. Beautiful color once again. Yeah. I think this is gonna be a good way to finish this session. Yeah. There's almost no sweetness in this steep anymore. We've mainly got woody notes and minerality now, with a touch of sweetness in the background. The consistency has also become lighter, so this tea is... I think it's given most of what it has to give, but even in this stage, it still remains quite pleasant. It's shown an interesting dynamic over the course of this session, where it started out as highly aromatic, highly viscous, very floral, very fruity, then sort of switched between these floral and these fruity notes. And the sweetness gradually decreased, and a lot of interesting flavors emerged underneath. The texture changed. It felt alive in a way. It felt like there was a sort of conversation going on between me and this tea as I was drinking it. And it was unveiling more and more of its personality as time went on. And afterwards, now that we're done, a memory that's a composite of all of these different factors is going to be left as the image I have of this tea. And this sort of mental trip we've taken together to JingMai, to Dapingjiang, where this tea is from, to their king tree in the middle of the village and the ancient trees surrounding it, the few families that live there, that harvested and processed this tea that we are drinking today. It's always fascinating to think how a tea has taken a journey around, half the globe basically, to end up in our cups. And that these things are possible, and that they are made possible by some of the people in our very midst. Pu'er is an infinite rabbit hole of things to explore and things to learn, and it would probably take several lifetimes to acquire a true in-depth knowledge about the field, or a holistic knowledge, if you will. And that's what makes it so interesting. There's always more to explore. There's always going to be people that have tried things you've never even heard of. And in that sense, like Gabriele mentioned earlier, if you would like me to taste any particular pu'ers, if there's anything you would like to try me, to have me try, sorry, on this show, feel free to reach out at any time, either to me directly or to the Nannuoshan email account, and we'll see what we'll be able to put together. Gabriele also mentioned that he's going to be on the lookout for some Gushu black tea next time he goes to China, and that's something I'm personally also very curious about. So hopefully we'll eventually get some news on that. Now that we're done with this tea, I'm gonna do one final thing, and that's take a closer look at the spent leaves. So I'm gonna get my little tea tray here. I'm gonna put this thing to the side, and we'll examine some leaves. Yes. Like Jan mentions in chat, pressing a tea is going to have an effect on its flavor. Also on the way it behaves after it's produced. So if we're still talking about Pu'er, there is going to be a difference in how it ages between loose Malcha and pressed bings or bricks or tuos and whatnot. Okay, so I've briefly cleared this out. We've got some nice leaves to look at here. Sort of medium size, a good mix. Here's a nice little leaf you can look at. All fairly nice. Maybe I can show it on the other camera as well. There we go. So this is what we drank today. 2017 Spring JingMai Gushu Pu'er. If you're interested in this, you know where to find it on the Nannuoshan website. And I think we're gonna wrap things up for today. We've drank a lot, we've talked a lot. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, if you have any suggestions, please let me know, let Gabriele know, and I will hopefully see you all again the next time. Thank you for joining me. This was Sigi's Pu'er box with NannuoLive. I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.